thoughts on the last two home duels and where the team's at after the weekend off?
Yeah, we've had a week and a half here. Obviously, the last duel we had wasn't a very pretty one, so I think we had a lot of motivated guys that got back to work this last week and a half. It's been good to not be traveling and to maybe give these guys a little break on the weight management side and on a point where we can just spend a lot of time working. You know, a lot of times when you're traveling a lot, you're kind of coming and going, you're trying to get a live day in and then get your weight down and on to the next one. So to have essentially a week and a half to kind of get a little reset on these guys' minds, I think has been good. So we've got a lot out of them.
Wrestlers are obviously very intense people, generally speaking. How nice or how good is it, how beneficial is it for them to have a little bit of a reset time to refocus and get back into it?
I think it's good. I think wrestling is probably a lot of sports are like this. You kind of got to get a groove going, right? And between all of our injuries, between the different lineup change-ups that we had, it's been hard for, let's just say, one single guy to really get a groove going throughout the whole season, if that makes sense, right? So whether that's if they're competing or from my point of view, which is where I spend a ton of time with them, which is like our work in the room, right? They kind of get that consistent week in and week out work, and that's just reps, and that's just you're working on them on like finer details. So to me, that's what was the biggest part about this week, is that we've been able to generally have a lineup of guys that are consistent for the last few weeks. So you get to have more consistency in their preparation, let's call it that, right? Where I would expect essentially the same lineup that we had last week moving forward for this week, right? So that is where I think the most benefit comes out of this last week and a half.
For sure. What kind of groove do you think the Frost brothers are in? We've obviously seen the results on the mat.
Yeah.
But earlier in the season, like Evan missed weight, not quite missed weight, but he sat because of weight.
Yeah.
And then now these last month or so, they've just been on a tear. What have you seen in their preparation and what they've been doing in the room to get in this groove that they're in?
Really good. I think Jacob's a really good example of a guy who maybe had a few lumps early in the season, but kind of stayed with it. And then obviously I think was the guy fourth ranked, knocked the fourth ranked guy off in the country. Again, when I talk about getting into a groove, that's what I mean. I mean, where you kind of get your mojo going, you get believing in yourself. When you're in and out of the lineup, it's easy to talk to yourself, but you kind of want to go and do it, right? So I think Jacob's a really good example of a guy that has been consistently with us now and going to consistently be with us through the end of the year and in a really good spot. And then Evan was same last year. I think you saw out of him. Once he got the weight out of his head and started worrying about wrestling, you got a really great guy out there, right? And that's kind of where he's getting at right now, is worrying about his wrestling and making his wrestling better and separating himself from everybody else, and hopefully continue to do that. He's got a really great matchup on Friday, a kid that kind of gave us all a scare in Las Vegas. So that'll be a good opportunity for him to see kind of where he's at and if he's really made those adjustments, because that's certainly a guy he can separate himself with. We don't need to be in a big hole and come back with a miracle pin, so.
How's Terrakina coming along with his injury?
Terrakina is solid as far as I'm concerned. I don't know if he's listed as probable, but yeah, he won't be going. But as far as I'm concerned, he's doing a lot of the stuff in the room with the rest of the guys. I think that I'm not going to predict when his comeback is, but certainly he's going to be back in the lineup at some point between now and Big 12 tournament. So
how much has, I guess, I don't know if you call them relaxed rules of the NCAA with medical hardship, has it helped at all with decisions when it comes to Anthony Casey at the beginning of the year with younger? I mean, has it made those decisions, I guess, easier to make rather than, oh my God, we got to get him back for even just a few matches?
Sure. Yeah, I think that's a really great question. I think it's a question that's been talked a lot about on message boards and Twitter, okay? At least I kind of see, or at least it enters into my atmosphere a little bit. And I think each one is individual. I think Anthony, you brought Anthony up. That's a unique situation where, I mean, ironically, Anthony could have went at Oklahoma State. And had Anthony gone at Oklahoma State, he'd have no redshirt option, right? So we decided, we was like, hey, let's wait. Obviously, we've got Frost doing a great job, but let's let this play out a little bit. And then on Monday, you've got infection, and guess what? He can't even come back if he wanted to, because he's got a number of surgeries ahead of him. So that's a situation where, how about, like, thank God we got other options,
Sure.
right? And Frost has been doing awesome, right? So I'm, again, not trying to take anything away from him.
Sure.
Casey, again, he's still, he's not limping, but I don't think that he had a season long. There wasn't really many options in those.
Sure.
Does that make sense? So I can appreciate what you're saying, and I could see where certainly there's a situation where let's take Anthony, for instance. The dude's going through surgery. In theory, let's say there's no one else there in the way to help. Like, maybe you would just throw him out there. Is that what's best for Anthony? I don't know. Would it be best for the team? If he can kind of limp, maybe, So I think you could make whatever argument you felt like making.
Sure.
If that makes sense. So we do the best we can with the rules we have. And obviously, from our point of view, we're going to look out for what's best for each guy, right? So what's best for Anthony, and so on.
Speaking of back on groove, how impressive has Panero been this
Yeah.
season at 3 different weights and then
Yeah.
now?
No, Panero's done a great job. Another good example, and I'm going to keep saying it because y'all are, about getting in a groove. You got to remember, Panero, he was essentially out for the last year and a half. You're talking about a guy that went from, like, hey, your career's over, to, hey, you're going to lose a year of eligibility, to, hey, actually, we messed up. That's just going to be a redshirt year, right? So imagine that emotional roller coaster and how focused his training was or wasn't last year, and then now you finally get your chance, right? So, again, a lot of him, to me, was just knocking the rust off. And he's got more levels. I'm going to continue to challenge him. I do every single day in the room, and I'll do it here publicly, that Panero Johnson has more levels, okay? He can separate himself from guys. He can be a guy that majors the vast majority of guys, and then we're getting closer matches when you're talking about your top 3, 4 guys, okay? That's the sort of ability he has, but that's going to come along with him believing it, too, not just coach saying it. So I continue to challenge him in that area, and he knows it. He gets it.
Talk a little bit about 197. Some guys have been in and out of the lineup.
Yeah.
One guy, Nate Schoen, battled injury through his career. What does he need to do to kind of take that next step?
Yep. I think we've seen a lot of great stuff out of Nate Schoen. Again, a lot of different variables in that weight class, and by that I mean different guys who have some different skill sets. And I think we've just been going with Schoen because he's a guy that just shows up every day and works his butt off. Again, we'll just keep talking about it. You're talking about a guy that came here and sat for 2 years, essentially. So now he's finally getting his shot, and the way I would describe it is the beginning of the year was like crazy chaos, like he's an elementary wrestler, right? And kind of getting him to narrow that down and keep it more solid. And he did a good job of that last weekend, of just really going out and winning a solid match, right? And if he can continue to do that, he's got even more untapped stuff in there. His first couple of years here, some of the explosive stuff that he hit, and I don't know if it's because he thought he was a heavyweight then, and maybe he thinks he feels bad, but it's still in there. So I continue to remind him about that explosive high crotch and double that he's got, and he's got a lot of really great offense that, again, I'm excited to continue to see him develop.
While we're talking about 197, Sawyer Bartell, what's his injury situation looking like?
His injury situation is looking like he will not be wrestling any more matches this year.
Yeah.
That's what it's looking like. So, which is unfortunate. I'm pretty sure that was his 5th match, right?
Okay.
So he wasn't going to be hopping into the lineup, and we were not going to pull his red shirt.
Yep.
But again, it's a young guy. You don't want injuries from anyone, but especially you want him to have the opportunity to develop through the rest of this year. So he's going to have a setback there, and then when he gets dialed back in this summer sometime, we'll be back to work.
You get another weekend with Friday night duel and then a Sunday afternoon. How exciting is it? Like you keep talking about, that consistency for these guys. They get another kind of repeat schedule type weekend. How exciting is that?
I think it's great. Anytime they get a chance to wrestle from our home crowd, that's awesome. These guys talk about it. They say it all the time about how much those fans bring them energy, right? So that's huge. Continue to turn out for us. Turn out for these guys. They love it. They feel it. They feel that energy. And then just be grateful for it, because the next weekend we're going to be South Dakota road, show up at UNI, and not be sleeping in your bed for about 4 days. So, again, grateful for that.
Not to ask you to, well, I guess I will ask you to look ahead, but next season, the logjam of talent you guys are probably going to have between 143 and 157. Have you guys thought about that, how you would manage that? Because I guess it's an embarrassment of riches, obviously, if you have everybody back. But I mean, have you given that any thought? Given, I'm sure single-mindedly, it's say get to merge, but have you, has it popped into your guys' heads to have a plan
I think
for it?
that's an obvious thing that's out there. What I would say, or I would caution any of our athletes or even our coaches as we have discussions, is look at where we are right now. Right? You don't know the future. It's easy for an athlete to sit there and be like, wow, I don't know if I'm going to have a chance or a spot. I would just encourage our guys, like, hey, focus on you, right? Like, if you focus on you, and I'm going to be the best guy, and I'm going to go win the spot, then you will get the most out of yourself, which is going to help this team the most, right? Because you don't know what's going to happen. Yeah, there's a log jam, but guess what? We don't have a log jam right now. You know, we got we got enough spots, but the log jam's gone, right? And I'm not saying things can and will happen, but things do happen, right? So again, if I'm communicating to our athletes, it's like, focus on you. You don't know what the future holds. You don't know. You know, maybe I'm picking a random name, Jacob Frost. Maybe you go, like, you get huge, and you're like a 74-pounder by next year. Probably not, but you know what I'm saying? Like, if you focus on you and you see where you're at, you know, you don't really know where it's going to take you. And at the end of the day, again, if you're just selfish on you, it's gonna help the team. So.
Friday night, senior night, smaller group of guys, but you know, guys like Evan Bott and Zach Gray, Preston Cherokee. What have they meant to the program over the years?
Yeah, it's going to be a good night to send them out. Unfortunately, none of them are going to be able to wrestle on that night for a variety of different reasons. But obviously, anytime you get a chance to honor a group of seniors, it's really cool. A wide variety of group there. You know, you got a group of guys there that are well known by the fan base, and a number of them that aren't. And what I would say for the group that aren't, that's a great group of guys that did a ton of really hard work in the shadows in that other group. A ton of really hard work to help their teammates be prepared. So even if the name isn't familiar to you out there, know that, especially, you know, I was looking at that list today, that's a group of guys that contributed a whole lot to this team. And then obviously the names that are more familiar, you know, it's good to send those guys off. Even a Zach Redding, who you haven't seen a whole lot of him this year, but you know, you forgot years ago when we were kind of on the up and coming, let's call it, that Zach Redding was one of our huge names, you know. So yeah, grateful for all those guys, and hopefully those fans give them a warm goodbye.
What does it say to Zach Redding's character that he has stuck around? He was a guy that was, I think he's a match away from being an All-American, right? He's around a 12 guy. Yeah, match away from being an All-American. Hasn't, like you said, really wrestled this season. What's it speak to his character that he stuck around and continued to show up day in and day out?
Yeah, I think it talks about his belief in himself and his belief in this system, and you know, things didn't go his way, but even like right now, he's ready to go. I can see in his eyes he's ready to go, because you don't know what the future holds, and not that anything's going to happen, but you know, our communication is you stay ready. You stay ready, because something could happen up or down, and you know, you need to be the guy there, right? So just having that attitude, coming in every day, working. What's awesome about a guy like that, selfishly, as a coach here, is when you've got a backup that's that good, that means that as a training partner out there every single day, you've got a really good feel. You know, you don't have a day off when you have to wrestle Zach Redding. You know, he's got a really funky feel. He can do some really, I'll call it slimy things with his elbows. Feels that like only uniquely he has, right? And maybe a handful of other guys you might wrestle. So again, appreciative of a guy like that for staying around. He probably could have packed up and left. He chose not to. And again, you don't know what the future holds, so we'll see.
Thanks, Coach.
Thank you.